The Battle of Vienna, 1683. Prologue: The Shadow of the Crescent Moon. In the late 17th century, Europe trembled under the shadow of the Ottoman Crescent. For more than 2 centuries, the Ottoman Empire had expanded relentlessly, from the deserts of Arabia to the plains of Hungary. Their armies, disciplined and vast, had toppled kingdoms and reshaped continents. To the Christian West, the Ottoman name was both awe and terror. To the Ottomans themselves, it was destiny, a divine mandate to bring their empire's light across the world. But in 1683, that destiny met its greatest challenge. At the heart of Central Europe stood Vienna, the glittering capital of the Habsburgs, a city of scholars, merchants, and faith, and the last great barrier before Western Europe. If Vienna fell, the road to Rome, Paris, and beyond would lie open. If it stood, it could halt an empire. And so began one of the most decisive confrontations in human history, the Battle of Vienna. The Ottoman Empire of the 17th century was a world superpower, a state of immense wealth, population, and military might. Its reach extended across 3 continents, from the Black Sea to the Sahara, from Baghdad to Budapest. Its dominion stretched farther than that of any European rival. The empire was ruled by Sultan Mehmed IV, known as the Hunter. Though he was less a warrior than his predecessors, his court brimmed with powerful men eager to prove the empire's supremacy. Chief among them was Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, a man of unyielding ambition and cold precision. Mustafa Pasha was a strategist, a visionary, and a man driven by pride. To him, Vienna was not merely a military target, it was a prize, a jewel of conquest that would immortalize his name alongside the great sultans. He had witnessed the Ottoman frontier slow in its advance through Hungary. The empire's old momentum was fading. To restore its glory, he sought a victory so grand that it would echo through eternity. And so he turned his gaze toward Vienna, the beating heart of Christian Europe. The march began in the spring of 1683. From the east, the Ottoman army poured across the plains like a moving city, 150,000 men strong, with tens of thousands of horses, camels, and cannons. It was one of the largest military forces assembled in Europe since the days of Rome. Behind them came endless supply caravans, siege engines, and the imperial standards of green and gold. The air was filled with the rhythm of drums and the chants of imams blessing the holy war ahead. To the Ottomans, this campaign was more than conquest. It was jihad, a struggle sanctified by faith and empire alike. The roads of Hungary trembled under their march. Fortresses like Gir and Esztergom fell in quick succession. Villages burned and rivers turned dark with ash and smoke. The Christian frontier armies, fractured and disorganized, retreated in panic. By mid-July, Vienna, the great city by the Danube, stood alone. Vienna in 1683 was a city of about 80,000 souls, merchants, craftsmen, nobles, and peasants alike. Its streets were narrow, its buildings ancient, but its walls were strong, ringed by bastions and moats built for a century of defense. Yet even those formidable walls would be tested as never before. When word reached Emperor Leopold I that the Ottoman army was advancing, he fled the city along with most of the court. The defense of Vienna was left to Count Rüdiger von Starhemberg, a soldier of fierce loyalty and grim determination. Starhemberg knew his odds. He had fewer than 15,000 soldiers, a handful of local militia, and almost no reinforcements. But he also knew that if Vienna fell, all of Europe could follow. So he resolved to fight, not for glory, but for survival. As the Ottoman vanguard appeared on the horizon, the bells of St. Stephen's Cathedral tolled across the city. Citizens gathered in the streets, clutching crucifixes and muskets. Priests prayed aloud for deliverance. The siege had begun. Kara Mustafa Pasha surrounded the city with a sea of tents, red, green, and white silks fluttering under the sun. The Ottoman camp stretched for miles, organized like a city itself, complete with bazaars, mosques, and command tents. From these lines, the Grand Vizier directed a relentless assault. Day and night, Ottoman sappers dug trenches closer to the walls. Cannons boomed without rest, shaking the ground beneath Vienna. They replied with their own artillery, though their powder and morale were running thin. Inside the city, disease spread. Food began to run out. Water grew scarce. Corpses filled the churches, and rats became the citizens' last meal. Still, Starhemberg refused to surrender. His men patched the walls at night with rubble and timber, fighting exhaustion and despair. In the Ottoman camp, Kara Mustafa's impatience grew. He believed victory was inevitable, only a matter of time before the cross would fall and the crescent would rise over Vienna.
Far to the north, a desperate message had already been sent, a plea for help carried through forests and mountains. It reached the court of John III Sobieski, King of Poland and Grand Duke of Lithuania, a monarch known not only for his intellect, but for his unmatched command on the battlefield. Sobieski was a warrior scholar, fluent in languages, strategy, and faith. He had fought the Ottomans before and had won. When he heard of Vienna's peril, he saw not only a call to arms, but a sacred duty. The loss of Vienna, he declared, would mean the loss of Christendom. The Polish king moved swiftly. He gathered an army of around 30,000 Polish, Austrian, Bavarian, Saxon, and other German troops and formed what would become known as the Holy League. Marching south toward the Danube, Sobieski's forces crossed mountain passes and ravines, hauling artillery through terrain thought impassable. Peasants cheered as they passed. Priests blessed them from hilltops. For weeks their march continued, until at last the banners of Poland appeared on the hills overlooking Vienna. By early September, Vienna was near collapse. The Ottoman bombardment had breached several bastions. The defenders were nearly out of ammunition. Every day brought new explosions and fires within the walls. The civilians huddled in cellars, praying for dawns that brought only more death. Kara Mustafa sent demands for surrender, promising mercy to those who yielded and annihilation to those who resisted. Starhemberg's reply was defiant: "We will fight to the last man." On September 11th, Ottoman miners detonated massive charges beneath the walls, collapsing entire sections. The defenders rushed to fill the gaps, fighting hand-to-hand against waves of janissaries. The crescent standard nearly touched the city gates. And then, from the hills to the west, came the distant sound of horns and drums. At first, the Ottomans thought it was thunder, but soon they realized it was something else entirely: the arrival of Sobieski's army. As night fell on September 11th, the Ottomans celebrated prematurely. Kara Mustafa believed Vienna was already his. He dined in his pavilion under a golden canopy, confident that the city would fall by morning. But in the forests above Vienna, Sobieski's army was taking position. Through the darkness, campfires flickered across the hills. Tens of thousands of soldiers, weary yet resolute. The air was filled with whispered prayers, the smell of gunpowder, and the distant tolling of Vienna's church bells, echoing like cries for help. Sobieski rode among his men, clad in shining armor, his white eagle banner fluttering beside him. He raised his sword to the sky and spoke softly to his son Jakob. "Tomorrow we fight not for land, but for faith, for all that must not perish." At dawn, the banners of the Holy League unfurled in the wind. The Battle of Vienna was about to begin. The sun rose over the hills of the Kahlenberg, casting a golden light upon a sight never before seen in Europe: a vast coalition army of Christians gathered from across the continent, united under one purpose. At the center rode King John III Sobieski, clad in armor engraved with the White Eagle of Poland. Around him stood commanders of empires and duchies: Charles of Lorraine, Prince Waldeck, Duke Charles of Bavaria, men who, for centuries, had fought each other, but on this day they stood side by side. Before them lay the Ottoman camp, an ocean of tents stretching to the horizon, banners glinting under the morning sun, the faint echo of muezzins calling the faithful to prayer. Sobieski surveyed the land carefully. The battlefield was a basin, forested hills above, the besieged city below, and the Ottoman army spread across the valley between. To descend from those heights meant charging downhill into the heart of the enemy. It was a gamble unlike any other. But Sobieski knew that if he delayed, Vienna would fall before nightfall. He turned to his generals and spoke the words that would define the day. "Let us march with faith in God and courage in our hearts." At dawn, the Holy League's artillery roared. The hills erupted with thunder as cannons opened fire, hurling shot and flame into the Ottoman lines. Kara Mustafa Pasha, startled from his sleep, rushed from his pavilion and stared in disbelief at the sight of banners moving across the ridges. Polish, Austrian, Bavarian, Saxon, and other German troops descending like a storm. The battle began in the western forest, where Imperial and German troops clashed with the Ottoman vanguard. Muskets cracked, swords clanged, and smoke filled the woods. The Ottomans fought fiercely, their janissaries holding firm. For hours, the two sides exchanged volleys and charges, the ground soaked with blood. The Christian advance was slow, but steady. Meanwhile, from the walls of Vienna, the defenders watched in awe. From their shattered bastions, they saw the banners of their allies unfurling on the hills above, a vision of hope after 2 months of despair. They cheered, and their morale surged. From within the city, they launched their own counterattack, firing on the Ottoman trenches, forcing Kara Mustafa to divide his focus between the besieged city and the approaching army. The Grand Vizier's confidence began to waver.
By midday, the Holy League had pushed through the forests and cleared the outer Ottoman positions. The coalition's left flank, under Charles of Lorraine, engaged the Ottoman right, while the Bavarians and Saxons pressed from the center. But the decisive blow was yet to come, from the right flank, where Sobieski's Polish army waited among the trees. For hours, Sobieski held back his cavalry, conserving strength. He watched the battlefield unfold with the patience of a strategist. His artillery hammered the Ottoman lines, but he knew one wrong move and his charge could be swallowed by chaos. Below, the Ottoman army still outnumbered the Allies. Tens of thousands of Sipahis and Janissaries rallied under Kara Mustafa's green standard. Drums beat, banners waved, the crescent shimmered against the sky. But beneath that surface of confidence, disorder was spreading. Ottoman command lines were stretched thin. Their communication faltered. Thousands of troops were still focused on Vienna's walls, unaware that the main battle was shifting behind them. Sobieski sensed it, the moment when resolve becomes panic. He turned to his men and gave a single command. The Polish cavalry, the Winged Hussars, were unlike any other force on earth. They were knights of a bygone age, armored from head to heel, mounted on the finest horses of Europe. Each carried a long lance, a curved saber, and, most famously, great wooden frames on their backs, from which rose arching wings of eagle or swan feathers. To the Ottomans, they looked like angels of death descending from the clouds. Sobieski positioned over 20,000 cavalrymen, Poles, Austrians, Bavarians, across the ridgeline. Below them lay the Ottoman camp, unaware that history's largest cavalry charge was about to begin. The king raised his sword to the heavens and shouted, Jesus, Maria, ratujcie nas. Jesus, Mary, save us. And then they charged. The ground shook. From the forests burst the cavalry, an avalanche of steel and flesh. Drums thundered, trumpets blared, and the sun flashed off lances like lightning. The winged hussars led the way, their plumes slicing the air, their hooves pounding in perfect rhythm. They crashed into the Ottoman lines with unstoppable force. The first wave shattered the Sepahis. The second broke the Janissaries. By the third, the Ottoman ranks dissolved into chaos. The sound was deafening, the clash of steel, the cries of men, the scream of horses. Dust rose like storm clouds as thousands of riders cut through the camp. Qadr Mustafa watched from his command tent, disbelief turning to terror. His grand army, his pride, was being ripped apart before his eyes.
As Sobieski's cavalry thundered forward, the infantry below surged in support. Imperial forces breached the Ottoman trenches. Cannons captured earlier were turned against their former masters. Within hours, the entire Ottoman formation collapsed. Soldiers fled toward the Danube, abandoning their weapons and tents. The once immaculate camp turned into chaos, silk pavilions trampled, gold and treasures looted, and fires spreading everywhere. By evening, the crescent banners that had once surrounded Vienna were gone, replaced by the smoke of defeat. At sunset, Sobieski entered the city through the ruins of its gate. Crowds wept and cheered as he dismounted before St. Stephen's Cathedral. He knelt in prayer, whispering words that would echo through centuries. Venimus, vidimus, Deus vicit. We came, we saw, God conquered. The victory at Vienna was overwhelming, but costly. Thousands of soldiers lay dead on the fields. The city itself was in ruins, its people starving, its streets lined with the dead. Yet amid the sorrow, hope had been reborn. The fall of Vienna would have meant the fall of Europe. Instead, it marked the beginning of the end for the Ottoman advance. For Qadr Mustafa Pasha, the price of failure was death. Weeks later, in Belgrade, the Sultan's envoys arrived at his tent. They carried a silken cord, the traditional instrument of Ottoman execution. The Grand Vizier bowed his head and met his fate in silence. The empire had lost not just a general, but its invincible reputation. The Battle of Vienna was more than a clash of armies. It was a turning point in world history. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire had expanded without challenge. After Vienna, that tide began to recede. One by one, the Christian states of Europe, Austria, Poland, Venice, and later Russia, would push the Ottomans back, reclaiming lands that had been lost for generations. The victory inspired new confidence across the continent. It marked the dawn of a new European unity, one that would shape the modern age. But it also left a legacy of division between East and West, Islam and Christendom, that would echo for centuries to come.
In the decades that followed, the story of the Winged Hussars grew into legend. Songs were sung, paintings painted, poems written. Children grew up hearing of the angels who descended from the hills to save Vienna. The Hussars became a symbol of courage, of men who stood against overwhelming odds, whose faith gave them strength beyond fear. Their wings, once feared on the battlefield, came to symbolize not death, but deliverance. In Poland, Jan III Sobieski was hailed as a national hero, the Lion of Lechestan, the savior of Christendom. His victory secured his place among the great commanders of history, alongside Alexander, Caesar, and Napoleon. Even his enemies respected him. Ottoman chroniclers wrote of his brilliance, admitting that the wind itself seemed to carry his cavalry. Vienna would never forget 1683. For decades after,
The city bore the scars of siege: shattered walls, burned suburbs, mass graves. But it also emerged stronger, reborn in defiance. New fortifications were built, new alliances forged. The siege had shown Europe not just the threat of the East, but the power of unity in the West. Vienna became a symbol, not merely of survival, but of civilization enduring through darkness. And yet, history is never so simple. The Ottomans would not collapse overnight. They remained powerful for another century, holding lands across 3 continents. But the momentum had shifted. From this moment on, Europe would rise in science, in exploration, in empire. The world's balance was tilting, and it began on the fields outside Vienna. Every empire believes it will last forever. The Ottomans had believed it, the Habsburgs too. But history moves like the tide, retreating, returning, reshaping everything it touches. The Battle of Vienna was not simply East versus West. It was humanity at a crossroads. Faith against faith, ambition against survival. 2 worlds, both convinced of divine destiny, colliding under the same sky. And from that collision, a new era emerged, one that would eventually give birth to the Enlightenment, to revolutions, to the modern age itself. The echoes of that battle can still be heard today, in the architecture of Vienna, in the memory of Poland, in the old Ottoman mosques that once dreamed of victory. History, after all, does not end. It only changes its face. As the night fell on September 12, 1683, the fires of war still glowed on the horizon. Sobieski rode once more along the battlefield, his armor stained, his eyes eerie. Around him lay the remnants of an empire's dream, broken standards, fallen soldiers, and the silence of defeat. He dismounted and gazed at Vienna, her walls scarred but still standing, and perhaps in that moment he understood that he had not only saved a city, but changed the course of civilization itself. In his letter to his wife, he wrote humbly, "All the glory be to God. He has made me his instrument in saving Christendom." Centuries later, the world would remember that September day when the fate of Europe hung by a thread and one king's courage turned the tide of history. The Battle of Vienna was not merely a victory of armies. It was the triumph of endurance, faith, and the will to resist, even when surrounded by darkness. And as history records, on that day the city stood, and with it, the West itself.